Thank you, Gwyneth, for your continued coverage from the legislature each week. It's been wonderful. You can watch all of those stories online right now on the New Mexico in Focus YouTube page. Now, time to welcome back our panelists. It might have been a backhanded phrase of appreciation, but it was one of those repeated in the state for years, quote, "Thank God for Mississippi," end quote. Now, what do I mean by that? For a long time, the Magnolia State had saved New Mexico from ranking last in reading and mathematics. But in recent years, Mississippi has pulled away from the land of enchantment, improving test scores of elementary students, according to a deep dive by the Albuquerque Journal last month that compared the two states. Now, Mississippi ranks 37th in fourth grade math and 34th in fourth grade reading proficiency. A former Mississippi State Superintendent of Education told the Journal that the success in Mississippi happened after the state instituted training for elementary teachers to learn, quote, "the science of reading," end quote. We're going to talk about that in a quick second. Lawmakers here took notice. In 2019, lawmakers passed legislation that mandated all New Mexico elementary teachers learn structured literacy. The program, Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, or LETRS, an acronym, currently has 6,000 educators enrolled and with 800 teachers who have already completed the course. Now, Tom, this program is only a few years along. Education leaders say it's too early to say if the LETRS program will be successful, but are you hopeful, even given what's happened in Mississippi? Let's just talk about those guys. I mean, we can't laugh at them anymore, certainly. They've had some good progress here. We should take note.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I'm a big believer in best practices.
Yeah.
You know, what can we learn from Mississippi? You know, how did the education system in Mississippi complement the culture of Mississippi? And I think that, you know, taking some best practices as far as rigor as well and applying them in New Mexico where appropriate, you know, just because something works well in Texas doesn't mean it's going to work well here.
That's right.
And vice versa. So it's all about cultural relevancy, and I think it's also about, you know, really setting that mark where it needs to be really high, and then creating a way to achieve that.
Boom, exactly. Ed, comparing our state to Mississippi can be problematic in a few ways, especially cultural differences. You know, but quite seriously, you know, we've got efforts here to preserve indigenous languages for children in our state. It's a much different deal here. So how should we look at this Mississippi thing? Should we feel badly about ourselves or just understand that we have different challenges here? We have a lot of challenges here that other states don't have.
We can't discard what Mississippi is doing. Obviously, they're doing something right. But what I would be interested in, and I'm sure that educators have looked into this, are what are the other 48 states doing? What is number one doing that's made them number one, right? We're focusing way too much on the tail end, but maybe we put a little more attention on the front end. And there are, you know, obviously we deal with some very specific issues here that are unique to New Mexico, and I think that always has to be factored in. But we can't use it as an excuse.
That's right.
I think that this is a good beginning. That we look at a success story with a group that is often ranked behind us, but I don't think that that's enough. I think we really need to stay focused and look at the uniqueness of our educational system and make the changes that need to be made in order to move up the way Mississippi has.
That's right. You know, it's a point of interest, Martha. Of course, you know, nearly 18% of New Mexico students speak English as a second language. And in fact, the Journal quoted Anja Rudiger, member of the Tribal Education Alliance, who questioned why we are comparing ourselves to Mississippi in the first place. It was a great quote here. Quote, "There's really not at all much in common. Poverty rates, obviously, but as a regard to specific assets that children bring to learning and all the cultural richness, I don't know that these comparisons bias that much." Would you agree with that?
Well, I suppose so.
Yeah.
I think more importantly, the comparison is less important than where we are in the hierarchy to begin with. And what I got out of this new initiative, I think is very important. It's not about teaching reading, it's about teaching the teachers how to teach reading. And you know, we have chronic teacher shortages in many parts of the state. People are thrown into a classroom, here's your classroom, teach them to read. If they did that for you, would you have any idea how to go about that? Neither would I. Probably no one at this table would. So I think it's a very good step. I do think, and I think the Journal pointed this out, it's going to take maybe 2 to 4 years to see some really concrete results from this. But I think it's a positive move, and as I would say, forget Mississippi, concentrate on where New Mexico is and bringing ourselves up regardless of where we are, unless we're number one, which we're a long way from right now.
Well, that's a good point there. And Tom, I'm curious, how do we measure success here? Martha makes a good point. In the journal piece, she mentioned Mississippi rolled out their initiative in 2014, and in 2019 actually saw their academic gains. That's not that much time. So how do we judge success here? That's always been a tough one.
Yeah, I'll say that instead of maybe going having a moonshot, why not just get to outer space? So readjusting what that is, it's still a success.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen some of that already with respect to restructuring the number of credits that are needed for graduation. New Mexico is one of 12 states that require 24 credits, and there's a bill right now moving through the legislature that suggests reducing that to 22 credits. Yep. Making things like Algebra 2 optional and increasing things like personal literacy. I think that's brilliant. I mean, I thought Algebra 2 should have been done.
Let's talk about it. I'm with you. I'm glad you brought us there.
Because financial literacy, when you look at how many people are in a recycling, poverty, right? Generational poverty, and even those who aren't, who just all of a sudden end up with all this debt. It's like that's the thing that really cripples our society. Look at how the national student debt discussion has really taken it. Well, it's all about financial literacy. I mean, people go into debt because sometimes they don't understand or they feel forced, and just having that as a part of the curriculum, I think, is huge.
That's a good point there. I really appreciate that. And Martha, I'm glad we're on this high school thing because it's interesting. This idea of Algebra 2. There's one side of the population with a big, it's got to go. And then the other side that says we should keep Algebra 2 because if we're going to be in step with other states on our educational attainment, they're not dropping Algebra 2. Why should we? Are we dumbing down things here?
We're already dumbed down, Gene.
Yeah.
Only 16% of our high school juniors are proficient in math. That says to me, forget Algebra 2. Let's do add, subtract, multiply, and divide first.
I laugh, but I'm not.
That's what we need to do. Algebra 2, well, this got me thinking, I took it, I guess, in high school. I have a PhD now. I have no idea what Algebra 2 is. So, but I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And I think that's where we need to go back and reevaluate. Now, the schools are still going to be allowed and maybe even encouraged to offer it. It's not like we're just striking it all together, but let's prioritize. Where are our kids and where do they need to go first?
Right. Exactly.
So,
interesting point on this too, Ed, is the idea of elective units versus forcing kids to do certain things. That could include trades. It could include, if you have a specific idea of what you want to do in life. It's not a bad idea when you think about it. I'm curious where you are in the Algebra 2 versus not, and also picking elective units as an alternative.
As the saying goes, you do what you did, you get what you got.
Right.
And so it's really important to disrupt the system. We know what we've been doing hasn't been as effective as we'd liked it to be. So let's change it up a little bit. I think Representative Andres Romero has done an exceptional job. I mean, he is a high school teacher himself.
That's right.
So he knows at the ground level what these students need. And he talks a lot about keeping these students engaged. And not every student is going to go to college.
Right.
Many of them will seek the trade route. And it's important to have those options. So we start focusing those students who don't want to go to college.
That's right.
Give them other options so that they start thinking about and engaging more in the high school experience. If they can relate to what's being taught in high school, they're more likely going to attend the high school classes and graduate. So I think it's important. Again, Algebra 2 is important if that's the path that you're taking, but I don't know that every student out there needs Algebra 2. And so I think Algebra 2, it is being offered. I think that was one of the amendments to the bill that that will be an option. And for those schools and for those student bodies, the school districts will have the opportunity to include and possibly even mandate Algebra 2 for their student body. But I think that's one of the positive things about this bill is that it does provide school districts options.
That's a good point there too. The option bit is really key. STEM, Tom. We've heard about STEM for years, including this governor, but we're not really hearing STEM in this argument here. Have we walked away from STEM as the path forward, or?
Well, I'm not that as intimately familiar with with the legislation that's being suggested in Santa Fe to say where STEM is.
Sure.
But what I would like to be able to see, to kind of go back to what Mr. Perea was saying, is the ability to offer vocational education as a pathway through. I think right now the curriculum is really focused on, okay, you're going to college as the next step, as opposed to, life starts as a next step. How's that? Right. And so that's what I like about this particular legislation, is that it offers that next step through the financial literacy aspect, and hopefully there can be some items in there, if not already, that really focuses on offering more of a vocational education option.
Point there. And in fact, on your point, Tom, just to kind of tie it down, those electives can include what you mentioned about financial literacy, but also fine arts, military career preparation. That's interesting.
That was really good.
Isn't that interesting? I think that meets us where we are. And for non-English speakers, non-English language classes, and computer science, those are the other electives. That makes sense to me. Do you guys too?
It does. I want to throw in one comment about the STEM.
Please.
Because nationally, there are twice as many men in college in the STEM area than the women. And if we're going to increase it, which we should, for those students that are on that path, as Tom says, we need to pay attention to who we are encouraging.
That's a good point
and
there.
are we encouraging our girls to the same extent that we are our boys? And it's always a concern because there are so many cultural taboos against, girls don't do math or science, so forth.
Time to
so
storm
just
the ramparts.
wanted to make us aware of that. And in terms of these, what do they call profiles for graduation? Tom's point is very good. Not everybody's going to college.
That's right.
So they need to have 2 tracks on that at least.
We're getting there. Sounds like we're getting there. Thanks again to all. We'll be right back here at the table for a final discussion on a bill that would expand Medicaid eligibility across the state. That's in about 10 minutes.